You're listening to Where You Live with Gene and Tony.
Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. We're talking about what is reasonable. And we're going to be looking at an article next that asks the question, when does an HOA enforcement become an unreasonable thing? And we're going to look at what one other legislator in North Carolina wants to ask or uncover in that quest. And we'd love to have you participate in the show today, too, if you'd like to ask a question of us here. The number, Tony?
Yeah, is 651-289-4488. And I think you have an email, don't you, Gene?
Yes, we do. And if you'd like to send an email to us to address here on the show, that's Gene, Gene, at ncmgi.com. And here is a question. We were talking about how to take a look and assess the strength of a homeowners association. And we have one listener who says, reserves are the money that is set aside out of my HOA fee each month to pay for major projects in my association like roofs and roads, right? And it sounds like the caller named Jones Association isn't setting aside enough money in their reserves to keep the property well maintained, and now it's coming back to bite them. How do I calculate what are adequate reserves in my community so I can tell if my association is okay? Wondering.
There's a great tool for that, and it's one we recommend highly to homeowners associations. You need to get an outside opinion in the form of a reserve study.
Yes.
Right? You have someone who knows how to do these things, who's done them before. Usually, there's some companies out there that this is what they do.
Sometimes the management company does it as well.
Sometimes the management company has someone on staff that can do those. And what the reserve study will show you, or what it will do, is analyze the components in your association that are common. In other words, under the auspices or under the responsibility of the association. For example, roofs, siding, streets, perhaps.
Carpeting
in the hallways, like in a condominium. They're first going to list all those things. They're going to analyze them, and they're going to lay out a spreadsheet that estimates when those things will have to be replaced and what the cost will be, so that you've got a nice spreadsheet that shows what you should be saving every month in order to pay for those things down the road.
And more importantly, they will also take a look at specifically what is the amount of useful life left in each of these components.
That was a big part of Joan's question was, it's a 20-year-old carpet. Shouldn't we have known that it wasn't going to last much longer?
And truth be known, if we were to look at that particular association, very well could be that they did have a reserve study done a couple years ago, stating that it was past its useful life. So just having one may just state the obvious. It may not mean that the association is actually following it and setting that money aside.
That's a good point. So if you're looking to purchase in a homeowners association, you should ask for a copy of the reserve study.
Yeah.
Look at it and see if it seems reasonable to you. Maybe ask some questions about, are all the common components on here? Maybe have a contractor even look at it to see if it's reasonable.
Yeah, and there is one thing that it sounds kind of technical. It's called the cash flow schedule.
Yeah.
All that really is a piece of paper that lists on the left side of the paper. Here are the components like the roof, the carpeting, the siding, whatnot. And then it'll go down line. It'll have column by column for each of the years, 2010, 2011, 2012, and it'll say when money needs to be set aside.
Right.
And it'll subtract that from the amount that the association has above. And if you get, as you look out on that schedule, if you get anywhere where the money that's required is going to cause the reserves to go bankrupt so that they have zero, that means you can count on a special assessment.
That's right. That's when the
more
roof
money
needs,
will be out of your pocket.
That's right. Typically, a reserve study covers about 30 years, right? It projects about 30 years in the future.
Yes.
But it's also not written in stone. The reserve study is not trying to predict exactly when the roofs need to be replaced.
Yeah.
You can't. It's supposed to give you the big picture, the overall picture. So it should be updated how often do you think?
Well, the state legislature has now said that's an event that needs to take place every 3 years.
Wow.
Where
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to be done. They use more vague language where it says it needs to be reviewed.
Reviewed, maybe not totally redone, but yeah.
But-
and
but-
that's
So what they're
a good idea.
stating is that you just need to, on a regular basis, need to be looking at that. We recommend, of course, that you do take a look at having your capital replacement study revamped and looked at every 5 years or so, where you for sure have all the components reviewed once again to see what the useful life is, because sometimes you could have looked at a study where the useful life was 10 years, but because of a few specific instances like a storm or other use,
Sure.
and all of a sudden you'll find out that instead of having 10 years left, you have 2 years left because the effective life has gone out quicker. And so that's one of the reasons you need to be taking a look at it. A good association does do this because it allows them to be able to continue to plan ahead.
That's right. And I used to tell boards before the state required these reserve studies, boards would say, well, why do we have to spend the money to do this? We'll just, slap, X number of dollars in the savings account every month. And I my answer to that always was because it informs your members of what you're doing. It explains to your members why you're doing what you're doing, why you're saving money. It lays out a picture for everyone in the association.
Well, that's a very good point, because because in my experience in 25, 26 years of association management, even though nobody likes a special assessment, nobody likes to see dues raised, most people are very reasonable and understand when they can see that this needs to be done, that they need to have the money, and you can either ask people for a couple $1,000s lump sum, at one point, or we can start asking for it a little bit at a time,
Saving
each
it
and
over
every
time.
month over a few
And
years.
You know what else that brings to mind? I also have heard this argument. Why should I start saving money now for something that needs to be done in 20 years? I won't even live here in 20 years.
Yeah, usually that's, there's older homeowners in an association
Sure.
that'll say, let the other person
Let the next
pay
guy.
for
But
that
you know what?
roof.
Joan brought up that issue. They're having trouble selling the condos in their property because of the condition of the common areas. So that's why you save for it. That's why you keep up the property, because maybe 10 years from now, if the roofs need to be replaced and there's no money to replace them, you won't be able to sell your condo.
That's a great point,
Yeah.
and a lot of buyers are becoming a lot more savvy and
Yes.
understand that.
Yes.
So you can't just let that go by.
True.
Well, it looks like we need to take another break here. When we come back, I promise we will next take a look at this North Carolina issue when asking the question, when does an HOA enforcement become unreasonable? We want you to be the judge.